The next speaker is from the North Harvard Street Project in Allston, and he has some personal experiences to tell you. Mr. Gerald Tetrow. Mr. Tetrow.
It's very interesting when Colonel Bunker remarked that Uncle Dudley is on his another one of his idiot monologues this weekend, because he usually gives us a pretty raw deal in the papers. The Boston Globe seems to be at the forefront of the urban renewal pitch in Boston, mainly because their new plant is sitting on land that was acquired through manipulations with the city, etc. So it's not surprising that the Boston Globe might like to indict some people who think a little bit more of their country than they do. So I wouldn't take their rebuff very seriously. But to get down to something much more serious than the Boston Globe or Uncle Dudley, I'm supposed to tell you how urban renewal works. Now that's a very difficult thing to do because you have to more or less live with urban renewal or live with people who have experienced the urban renewal program and live to see some of the planners who like to plan for these people, not with them, but for them. An adequate presentation of how urban renewal works cannot be made unless we respect a hard and fast distinction between the theory of how the program ought to work and the economic and physical execution of the plan. In order to do this, I shall therefore submit a brief introduction concerning the laws, the financial mechanisms, and the various systems of credits, all of which are necessary for the execution of urban renewal plans. Our analysis will continue with certain considerations of the results of urban renewal thus far executed. Primary on our list of considerations here should be questions of human rights and the dignity of the individual. Property rights are human rights. This is another thing that the accolades of the liberal press seems to have forgotten. We shall attempt to assess, then, the trend of present federal planning in order to ascertain whether or not such theories, in fact, accomplish what they purport in the abstract. Our analysis will conclude by considering the theoretical fabric of the arguments for general city planning. We shall assess them in the framework of a constitutional and genuinely representative form of government. And I can tell you right now, they don't fare too well when they measure up, or when they try to measure up, to a constitutional form of government. The purpose of the Federal Urban Renewal Program is to improve the environment in which we live. To accomplish this, it rebuilds or rehabilitates existing urban and rural areas. Urban renewal usually starts in the downtown business districts and then progresses outward. They are considering plans, and they're calling it rural renewal. $2.1 billion has been allocated to be spent in New York City alone. More than this will be spent in Boston. This is the incredible feature. More than this will be spent in Boston if all of the plans currently contemplated are carried out. At the same time, assuming an extension of these plans, assuming that they get the grants that they want, more than 700,000 people will be required to move in this city alone. Half, approximately 300,000 people. 350,000 will be required to move. Under urban renewal laws, property is taken by eminent domain and the land is cleared. Then it is either sold or leased back to institutional or private developers. Prior to '54, the taking for sale or lease back to private interest was not legal. Until that time, land could be taken only for public use. In 1954, the United States Supreme Court in the Berman versus Parker case reinterpreted the powers of eminent domain. In so doing, the phrase public use was interpreted to effectively include public welfare. In Massachusetts, property may be taken for urban renewal if it obstructs the sound growth, quote, sound growth of the community. The power to make this determination is vested in the local urban renewal authorities. The city or town government usually retains a veto power over an urban renewal plan. I'll get to this veto power later. It's usually manifested in the form of a city council. Well, I have a lot of things to say about the city council in Boston. After a plan is passed at the local level, it must be approved by the state authority, the regional authority, located in New York, for Massachusetts anyway, and also the federal government. As a practical matter, plans approved at the local level are eventually approved at all other levels. Now, we have alleged at certain occasions that the process of rubber stamping has gone on here. But of course, that's a filthy lie. We know that there's no rubber stamping. After the land is cleared, it is sold or leased back to developers. When it is sold, it goes for about 30% of the cleared cost. The taxpayer pays for acquiring and clearing the land. For accounting purposes, 2/3 of the costs are allocated to the federal government and 1/3 to the state and local governments. The financing of new construction is done through conventional capital sources, such as banks and insurance companies. Usually, 90% or more of the construction costs are financed by federally insured mortgages at low interest rates. Contractors' fees, architects' fees, and legal fees are frequently paid by equity ownership in the building, with the result that the owners need put up very little cash. 3 to 5% of the cost of the building is not uncommon. 3 to 5% for the developer. If the property loses money, here is the federal catch. If the property loses money, it is taken over by the mortgage holders and usually sold at auction. Government insurance on the mortgage pays the loss. Who pays for the government insurance? There's another deal in urban renewal that is recent, has recently developed, did not develop with the inception of the program, and that's called tax credits. The Kendall Square project in Cambridge, for instance, is not going to cost the local government its 1/3 share. Under Section 112 of the Federal Housing Act, the local government gets credit for several $1 million worth of building that MIT has done in the vicinity. If MIT builds faculty housing on 13 acres which are not going to be used for NASA, then the adjacent East Cambridge area may be taken for urban renewal, with land acquisition and clearance totally paid by the federal government under Section 112. The process can go on indefinitely. If an educational institution or hospital spends money for construction, the federal government will provide twice as much for urban renewal on adjacent land. The Mission Hill project also comes under this law. Boston has nearly $600 million worth of institutional building planned between now and 1975. This will entitle the city to nearly $1.2 billion in federal credits. The assessed valuation of the city is about $1.55 billion. If we assume that property is taken at twice its assessed value, and that $300 million worth is taken for the institutional building, then by 1985, over half the city will have been taken, and more than 350,000 people will lose their homes. From 1949 to 1962, 126,000 housing units were torn down, and 32,000 built in completed urban renewal projects. There was thus a net loss of 84,000 housing units. Most of those torn down were low rental units, with a nationwide average of $50 a month. These are the ones that were torn down. Only about 2,000 of the replacement units were in the low rent range. Others were medium or high rental units going as high as $400 a month. By mid-64, 777 cities had urban renewal programs. 1,634 projects were in the planning or execution stage, and $4.4 billion had been spent for land acquisition and clearance. By the end of '65, 1 million people will have been relocated by urban renewal. Based on the mid-'64 figure of $4.4 billion, the cost per relocatee is in excess of $4,400 for land acquisition and clearance. For every dollar spent for acquisition and clearance, $3.65 is spent for new construction. Thus, the total cost per relocatee is in excess of $20,460. There is an alternative to urban renewal. They say if you don't want your house torn down, you can have it rehabilitated. If you want to read about rehabilitation, read the General Laws, Chapter 121, Section 26JJJ. Property not taken for clearance in an urban renewal project area is put under the rehabilitation program. The local development authority officials are authorized to enter one's home and tell the owner what he must do to bring the property up to their standards and desires, which are quite strict. If the owner cannot afford to do what they wish, or does not wish to comply for other reasons, the property is taken by eminent domain and disposed as the authority sees fit. Upon completion of rehabilitation, the owner must give preference first to the previous tenants who can pay the rent, and then to other residents of the city. Speaking practically, he cannot bring parents or friends into his 2 or 3 family dwelling if they come from outside the city. This restriction lasts for 5 years, or for the life of the government-insured mortgage taken out for rehabilitation, when longer than 5 years. At the end of 5 years or longer, the authority can require more rehabilitation. You know, if this wasn't, it really is ludicrous, but it's true, it's happening. It's terrible. Starting the cycle over again. The liberal mind works in strange patterns. Once an urban renewal project starts, property is under such control, theoretically, for 40 years. On March 25, 1965, the BRA, which is the Boston Redevelopment Authority, passed a resolution entitled Resolution of the Boston Redevelopment Authority that the Charlestown project area is an eligible urban renewal area. Included in the resolution is a list of 44 building defects which owners would be required to fix under rehabilitation. The following are some of these defects. 1. Existence of rooms less than 7 by 10 feet used for habitation. 4. Presence of enclosed rooms without windows used for habitation. 5. Inside walls and ceilings, evidence of cracks. 6. Inside walls and ceilings, base material loose and or broken. 7. Inside walls and ceilings, evidence of leaks. 8. Flooring worn, loose and or missing. 9. Floors sagging and or pitched. 11. Lack of central heating. 24. Lack of 2 electrical outlets in each room. 27. Vermin infestation, evident or reported. 35. Presence of dampness or water in basement. 38. Roof sagging or out of line. It should be noted that any owner whose building has settled is called for extremely expensive repairs. If your house is over 5 years old, watch out. It can be seen, therefore, that the much-touted rehab program, in their cute little language they call it rehab, is really not an alternative to eminent domain, but merely another means to acquire property for speculation. Consideration is not given to the fact that if the city and state building codes were more rigidly enforced, over the years, the alleged claims for extensive urban renewal would, in the light of such action, appear totally unworthy of consideration, even by the Boston Globe. Now, urban renewal procedure. What do they do? Well, like Logue in Boston tells us that we don't have to have urban renewal unless we want it. Well, we told Logue several times, rather emphatically, that we did not want it. Boy, we're getting it. Right down the throat. This is called citizens' participation. Logue admitted on a radio program that the taking of the North Harvard area was being made because the people were rude. They were naughty when they defended their homes at the urban renewal hearing and told Mr. Logue and company to get out. We were naughty and rude, therefore we must lose our homes. There are many legal avenues to pursue in urban renewal. None of them will bear fruit. One of the things that we're entitled to, once they damn you, is an urban renewal hearing. This is a hearing before the Boston Redevelopment Authority. The hearing is made so that the authority can hear the residents speak about the plan. The authority then convenes and judges its own plan, votes on the plan that it has already voted to execute. If you can figure that out, I can't quite fathom the logic to that. They approve the plan. The Urban Renewal Authority has never disapproved of its own plans. So it seems to me that it makes the whole idea of an urban renewal hearing seem utterly fantastic. All right, you say, fine. There are other authorities. The Boston City Council. This is the veto power of which I spoke of earlier. They, in fact, have a veto power. We went before the Boston City Council. There was a meeting for the South Cove area a couple of days ago. It was a whitewash. The meeting for Charlestown was a whitewash. In the meeting for the North Harvard area, 100% of the residents disapproved of the plans proposed by the Urban Renewal Authority. 100%. The fire marshal testified that there's no fire hazard. The police chief testified that there's been no instances of delinquency. Judges, representatives, etc., all testified on behalf of the residents. The City Council voted for the renewal plan, 5-4. The Boston City Council, ladies and gentlemen, is rotten. If they're looking for vermin infestation, the vermin are in City Hall. The vermin are the people who go through the streets making windshield appraisals of people's homes, moving them out of an area and caring not a whit for them. These are the vermin. These are the vermin on the federal paycheck. These are the vermin that your paycheck has to suffer for. Don't forget it. City Council hearings. All right, when you get turned down by the City Council, you go to the State Housing Board. Now, the State Housing Board is a very interesting organization. If I remember correctly, we went before the State Housing Board in the North Harvard area. There were 3 men. We were judged by a triumvirate. They approved the urban renewal plans. Now you see why we allege that there's a rubber stamping process going on. They approved of the urban renewal plans. Subsequent to that, 2 of the members, Mr. Letney and Mr. Benoit, were indicted for conspiracy and attempt to set up a bribe. That's the State Housing Board. You have a chance in the courts. Try it. The Urban Renewal Authority has a staff of competent lawyers who are well schooled in interpreting the vague generalizations of General Law 121. Mrs. Goodnow mentioned earlier open blighted area. They tried to declare land in Mattapan open blighted area because it had rocks on it and too many trees. This, mind you, this is the criterion, or one of the criteria under which buildings are taken, land is taken. Something so lightheaded and idiotic as a concept as open blighted area. We would have to declare our national forests, our national parks, open blighted areas in that case. if we extend the idiotic logic, urban renewal does not clear slums. The one thing that the city planner forgets: a slum is not in the building, a slum is in the mind of the inhabitant. You clear the slum from the inside out. People have been moved from the South End, from the West End. Where did they move? To places that they could afford. Charlestown, South Boston, etc. Now they're after Charlestown. They projected plans for South Boston. Where is there evidence of removing slums? You just can't eliminate slums by moving people around the city. In this sense, urban renewal is the most discriminatory form of land taking, because it hits the economically deprived person. And it hits him hard. It hits him where it most hurts. It takes the roof right from over him, I should say. I was going to say from under him, but that would be rather strange. So in conclusion, I would say this: there's plenty of propaganda going on. The Boston Globe, no doubt, will have something to say. But they cannot give evidence of any justice that has been handed out by the Renewal Authority. They cannot give evidence of any genuinely low-cost housing that has been built, because a developer will not build low-cost housing. It's not economically feasible for his pocketbook. And that's all he cares for. So, who benefits from this plan? Not the people that have been redistributed throughout the city. The city councilors, perhaps, who get a little pocket cash for their vote. The representatives, our great and honorable General Court, who will turn down a bill to save people's homes. These are the very vermin who will benefit from urban renewal. We are the ones who have to pay for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tetrow. Thank you very much. We had a pretty good general picture of the damage that's being done by urban renewal to the morals, to the economics, to the physical property here of our town of Boston.